Hey everyone, Josh here, WarGamingNewb Historical, back with a review of sorts of Bolt Action Gentleman's War. Now, I personally do not have this two-player starter yet, but I wanted to share my thoughts on it and whether or not this is a good value and a good purchase for a player who has been playing Bolt Action or a new player just trying to break in. Obviously, Gentleman's War is centered around the North Africa campaign, so the starter itself will have both a Africa Corps force as well as an 8th Army force. Currently going for 142 on Warlord's site. Once this is readily available in other retailers, this price may change, and specifically that would be like Amazon, because they tend to sell this at a lower rate. So in this kit, you're going to get an A5 Bolt Action Rulebook, a Gentleman's War Bolt Action Starter Set booklet, so it will probably have a scenario or two. If this is anything like Island Assault and Band of Brothers, you're going to get 24 Africa Corps Plastic Infantry, 1 Plastic SDKFZ 222 or 223 Armored Card based on what you would like to build out of it. You're going to get 24 8th Army Desert Rats Plastic Infantry and 1 Plastic Humber Mark II or Mark IV Armored Car water slide decals for both of those vehicles, as well as plastic bolt action templates and tokens, pin markers, 6-sided spot dice, and then bolt action order dice. So, seems like a pretty standard two-player starter for bolt action. These are always good, especially considering what you get. It's a pretty decent value. Let me just switch to a picture, an image of what you will be getting. So it looks like you are getting possibly 6 bolt action order dice. And then you're going to get a bunch of pin markers. And those are the 2 items that make this a bolt action game. They're so integral to the gameplay of bolt action. I like the fact that you're going to get 6 order dice, at least from this image. That may change, and I'll update this video if we find out that there are only 5. But in Island Assault, you got 6 each for the Japanese and for the Marines. So this is what your kit will look like. 24 8th Army Infantry and a Humber scout car. And then you have the SDKFZ 222 or 223, depending on how you build it, as well as 24 Africa Corps Infantry. Pretty standard, very similar to what you've received previously in both Band of Brothers and Island Assault. So, my thoughts on this. And I'm just going to rifle through some of these pictures here so you guys can see what you get. So my thoughts on this set, it really depends on what you're trying to get out of this particular two-player starter. Obviously it has same design heritage from the previous two-player starters, Band of Brothers and Island Assault, more closely aligned to what you get in Island Assault than Band of Brothers, because you get a vehicle on each side of the two-player starter. What I really do not like, especially if you're a new player getting into World War II skirmish gaming, or just World War II gaming in general, is that you get scout cars. While in itself is not a bad thing, if you are a new player and want to get a feel for bolt action and you want to have the best toys, usually you want to have armor, a tank, something like that, assault gun, just something that's kind of like a big showpiece for your particular nation in this particular starter set. The scout cars are an interesting add. I believe versions of these were released earlier that were most likely resin and metal. It's nice to have these kits as plastic and be able to mock them up as 2 different versions of that particular vehicle. Those are always good. But scout cars seem underwhelming, especially if you're trying to get somebody to play in a World War II setting. Usually you want the armor, which are basically, in this particular instance, Queens of the Desert. So I'm a little disappointed that these scout cars were included rather than, let's say, Panzer III or even a Tiger on the German side, or like a Crusader or Matilda on the British side. Even having an assault gun might be an interesting choice over a scout car. Now, this is based on what we're seeing without actually having the starter set in our hands. I don't know what the scenario is or scenarios are in the Gentleman's War starter booklet. I don't know what the rationale is for including scout cars rather than armor. It's possible that this is supposed to be a reconnaissance force in a meeting engagement, which makes sense that they would have a lighter vehicle for this starter. But again, if you are a World War II neophyte, World War II wargaming neophyte, you probably would rather have had a tank, because the tanks are basically the showpiece that is included in two-player starters. I mean, if you look at Island Assault, you got a tank for the Japanese, and you got half-track for the Marines, which in a sense is historically accurate. The medium tank for the Japanese that was included in that set, not a great tank, but a tank nonetheless. Half-track, okay, that makes sense for the Marines. They probably wouldn't have armor. I don't know if I mentioned it in the last review for like Island Assault, if I would rather have had the half-track or maybe a Sherman. I still will stick to the idea that having a tank on each side would make this more fun experience for a new player. Now, if you are an invested player in bolt action and you are thinking of using this as a jumping off point for getting into North Africa, getting into Africa Corps or 8th Army, this is a decent set, especially if you don't have the scout cars already in your collection. It's always nice to have something new. But from a new player perspective, tanks all the way. With that said, this starter seems to be on par with what you've seen before. So Island Assault, you had the medium tank for the Japanese and the half-track for the Marines. In Band of Brothers, you had the half-track for the Germans and just extra infantry for the airborne. So I think this is a little bit more balanced in that the forces, you have 24 infantry on each side. You have comparable scout cars on each side. So the positive of that is that your forces will not be imbalanced in terms of gameplay. I think the Band of Brothers was the worst in that you only had 12 infantry for the Germans and then the half-track, but you had, I think, 24 airborne, or maybe even the full box of airborne on there, and also the ability to make the 30 caliber medium machine guns. The airborne seemed a little bit overpowered to the Germans, depending on how you kitted out the Germans in that set. So the positive of Gentleman's War is that it seems to be evenly balanced across both sides of the two-player starter. So yeah. With that said, Gentleman's War is not a bad way to go. Is it a twofer? I always like to answer that question for each of these starters. I think it may be. I think that the best part about these two-player starters, or at least this particular two-player starter, is that the scout cars can be configured in two different versions. So if you were to buy two of these sets, you could have both versions of the scout cars on each side. So that's always neat. You will have an overabundance of infantry, but obviously special weapons, and then just making a full squad out of a specific, making a full squad with specific weapons will be answered by adding another Gentleman's War, whether that's assault guns on the German side, or machine guns, medium machine guns, all that stuff, machine gun teams. I think a twofer, this would be a twofer. It's just that I have a little bit of disappointment in terms of the vehicles that you received in this kit. But ultimately, pretty balanced. So, in summary, Gentleman's War, not the most exciting two-player starter. I think Island Assault was a little bit more exciting for me. But that doesn't mean that this isn't a bad starter. Like I said, the thing that it has going for it is that it is pretty much evenly balanced in terms of forces. You're not going to have one side having overpowering the other side in this particular one. They have pretty much the same thing. Obviously, special national rules can make a difference, like Hitler's buzzsaw for any machine gun or machine gun teams on the German side might tip the balance over a little bit, but I believe that the 8th Army have special national rules that can equally make it tough for the Germans. So I'm definitely going to get this starter. Maybe not right away, because I do have an 8th army and an Africa Corps army already. But, you know, it never hurts to have more, especially if you're going to play larger games. Alright guys, those are my thoughts on Bolt Action Gentleman's War. What do you guys think about this particular starter? Is it something that you're excited to purchase, or is this something that you're going to just leave on the shelf? For me, I'm definitely going to get it. It's always nice to get new product, and it's a pretty decent starter, if a little bit lackluster, at least for me. So, alright, that's it. If you like this video, go ahead and click like. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I appreciate it if you would. Click the bell notification icon to get notified of all new reviews coming out of the channel, and then click the link in the description below to join our Discord server. That's the best way I can personally interact with you and chit-chat you about Bolt Action and any other game that we cover on the channel. That's it. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more reviews from WarGamingNewb Historical.